Good evening. This is Richard Curtis, and I'm your host this evening for the Thursday Evening Call-In Show. Joining me in the studio this evening is Laurie Geller, a seasoned veteran of the third parties movement in Colorado, and founding organizer with the Draft Ralph Nader campaign on behalf of the Green Party. Welcome, Laurie.
Oh, pleasure to be here.
So, the overriding theme of this series of interviews that I'm doing is why should I vote for your candidate? So let's start with that. Why should I vote for Ralph?
All right, great question. You, Richard, should vote for Ralph Nader in the Green Party because in this election year, they are the only ones who are willing to confront the fact that not just our entire economy, but our entire political system is coming to be owned and controlled by a very wealthy and a very powerful corporate elite. And they're the only ones willing to place limitations on this corporate power, both economically and politically. Further, Ralph Nader and the Green Party are the only ones who are willing to discuss the idea of sustainable economic development, who recognize that we do live in a world that has finite resources and we must protect these resources for ourselves and for future generations. You know, both major parties are operating under this paradigm of endlessly increasing growth and endlessly increasing consumption. And that's really, you know, a foolish and a selfish way to proceed and shows no regard for our future, really. Also, Ralph Nader and the Green Party, I think, are the only ones to step back from this balanced budget frenzy that everyone seems to be in. You know, if you want to balance the budget, I think we should do it in a way that shows some common sense and shows some compassion. You do not have to balance the budget on the backs of the weakest members of our society by cutting programs for the poor, for children, or for wealthy people. Nader and the Greens have talked about balancing the budget can be done easily by deep cuts in military spending, by elimination of corporate welfare. There are better ways to do this. And finally, I would say that Ralph Nader and the Green Party are the only ones to speak out for a true progressive agenda, who are willing to fight for universal health care, for full employment, for a living wage, for the rights of organized labor, and for the rights of communities to democratically control their own future. So, I mean, there's a whole host of issues that really aren't even on the radar of the two major parties. And that's why it's so important that Ralph Nader is in this race, and important for people who believe in these issues to support him.
Well, you know, Laurie, you and Ralph Nader both have a fabulous rap.
Oh, thank you.
You know, I didn't catch all of the things that Ralph Nader's been saying, you know, that have been broadcast. His acceptance speech at the Green Party convention was notable, I think, in that, and all of these various ideas that he laid out. You know, it's clear that they're not being discussed. But why don't we start with the hard question? And you know, it's obviously the question that Greens are getting asked all the time, and that is, well, if we vote for Ralph Nader and he doesn't win, and then Bob Dole gets elected, whew, that's bad. Boy, what happens then?
Well, you're talking about, of course, the spoiler issue, which is definitely a central issue in third-party politics. And Nader's short answer to that is, you know, how do you spoil a system that's already rotten to the core? Well, I think this is a very important issue, and I think I'd like to, you know, discuss it on many different levels. First, on the realistic level, I don't think there's much of a chance at all that we're going to see Bob Dole as president. I mean, it looks like we're heading for one of the largest landslides for Clinton that we've had in a very, very long time. So
that's an interesting point. Let me just interrupt you just for a moment right there and reiterate to the listeners out there that this is the Thursday Evening Call-In Show, which means we are very much welcoming your participation in the show. Should you have any questions for Laurie about the Greens or about Ralph Nader and his campaign for the presidency, you can reach us here at 449-4885. And for those of you who may be listening farther away, up in the Fort Collins listening audience, you can reach us toll-free at 1-800-737-3030. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. So, yeah, on the spoiler issue, even if we weren't heading towards the inevitable Clinton victory, which I think that sure we are, there's a lot of good reasons to still vote for someone who you believe in rather than the lesser of two evils. Now, this idea of voting for the lesser of two evils, it's not only an unpleasant thing to do, it's really the exact opposite of the desired effect of people, that what they want to do when they vote for this lesser of two evil candidate. I mean, if you think about basic political strategy, if you are going to vote for one of those two major party candidates, no matter what, the optimal strategy of those parties is then to move away from your position to try to court the votes of people who believe very differently from you. I mean, every year we have this lesser of two evils choice, and every year it gets worse and worse. And by playing along with this game, you're fueling that trend. You're pushing the Democrats farther and farther to the right because you're telling them, look, no matter what you do, even if you run on a Republican agenda like Clinton's doing, I'll vote for you. Don't worry, you can take my vote for granted. And that's a very dangerous game to play. Now, on the other hand, if you do vote for a third-party candidate who really stands up for what you believe in, even if he doesn't win, if you can get a decent, percentage of the vote, you can have a profound effect on the political dialogue in this country. And we really just need to look back to 1992 as a good example of that, what I call the Perot phenomenon, where Perot's voters, they didn't win one state in the electoral college, so maybe, would you say they threw away their votes? I would say absolutely not. They couldn't have spent their votes more wisely if they tried. Because what was the big issue for the Reform Party was balancing the budget. Well, look what's happened. Since that election, that's been the single obsession of both parties. They've been falling all over themselves to court this Perot voting bloc. Now just imagine if progressives were willing to stand up the same way for an issue, say for universal health care, for living wage, stand up and vote their convictions on these issues and say, yes, we do have somewhere else to go and we'll go there. You would suddenly see these issues on the table like we've never seen before. Even if Nader only pulls in, say, 10% of the popular vote, you can have such a profound influence on the political dialogue that way.
Well, that is an interesting point. And I notice here from our technical assistant that we have our first caller. Why don't we go to that right now? We have Steve with us from Martin Acres. Steve, are you there?
Mm-hmm. I have two other reasons to vote for Ralph Nader. Is that if he accumulates some percentage of the vote, then the Green Party becomes eligible for matching funds from the government if they choose to accept that thing. And another reason that Ralph Nader is not being invited to dialogue with Clinton and Dole is that they're not on the ballot in all of. He's not a real candidate for office because he's not in the ballot in enough states. But if you can demonstrate enough support, then that helps legitimize the Green Party. So there's two reasons to vote for Ralph Nader.
Excellent point.
So you'd advocate that long-term strategy?
Well, yeah, for the short term. I mean, it could mean a lot of money in the next election if you show if this support is shown in this election, then that support will be reflected financially on down the line. That's short term, long term. That's two reasons. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Bye.
And Steve's got a great point there, and there's one other I would add to that. The spoiler argument is based on the assumption that Nader would only take votes from the left away from Clinton. But if you look at reality, that's really not the case. Now, Nader was on the ballot in the New Hampshire primaries in '92. He didn't actually intend to be. He was campaigning for none of the above option, but a lot of people, about 5%, voted for him. Ends up over half of his votes came from Republicans. And just more recently, in polls in California, where he's on the ballot this year, a large percentage of voters who say they want to vote for him are self-proclaimed Republican and Libertarian voters. So that assumption that he's just taking votes away from Clinton really isn't valid. And I think part of the reason for this is, we're stuck in this kind of two-dimensional spectrum of left-right and assume everyone fits neatly in there. And I think those kind of labels do have their place, but they are limited in how they describe what the current political situation is. I think the spectrum might be better defined as, instead of liberal versus conservative, to define it as populist versus corporatist. And in that sense, you could say both of the major parties are solidly in the corporatist camp, and you have a whole range of groups and people out there who are in this populist camp. And anyone who's willing to speak out to populist issues, I think, is going to attract people from across that left-right spectrum.
Well, okay. I happen to be one of those people who thinks we need to re-emphasize that left-right understanding and sort of expand or deepen the political analysis we have in this country. And in that regard, I find myself at times wondering about Ralph Nader's grasp of the whole situation. Now, it's certainly true, as I said, that he has a great rap, but I often find that he stops short of a complete analysis of the problem in this country. The fact that there are rich people and rich people run the government and they're in power. And it seems to me that if you want to change that dynamic, that you have to change the fact of rich people running the country. And that is not something that I see Ralph Nader advocating. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I guess I'd really have to disagree with that, because so much of what I've heard Nader speaking about lately in his acceptance speech recently in California focuses exactly on that issue, exactly on the fact that we have major transnational corporations and the millionaires and billionaires of this company who have such undue political influence, and that is such a central part of the problem. And actually, I mean, I think he addresses that issue more eloquently than just about anyone else out there.
Well, what does he say about how you take power away from the rich and give power to ordinary people?
Oh, he's got about a million ideas on that. A lot of it has to do with ending corporate welfare in this country, that a lot of our general tax money goes to help these very, very wealthy corporations make even more profits and do it at the expense of the American people and American workers. And we need a radical restructuring of our tax system to do so. One thing I was just reading, in the 1950s, corporate tax income represented 25 to 30% of federal income. Today, it's between 6 and 8% of our federal income. And there are many, many of these big corporations that pay less than 2% tax. And it's because they have all of these loopholes written into law, and these things have got to be changed. And certainly neither Clinton nor Dole are going to be willing to address those issues.
Well, and it's certainly a travesty of justice that that is the case. Obviously, corporations do not pay their fair share, but what I'm getting at is a little bit more fundamental, that making corporations pay their fair share doesn't change the dynamic of who has power and who runs the country. It just means that rich people are paying a little bit more.
And that's where a lot of the campaign finance reform issues come in. It's to try to make it so that people who have money, that doesn't give them a disproportionate voice with our government. If we could have public financing of campaigns, say, so just because you're a millionaire, that doesn't give you any extra influence with your congressman because you can't be donating these huge amounts of money to them. That could go a long way in helping to change this dynamic. And then just on the more basic economic level, some of these progressive reforms I've been talking about are ways to help narrow this gap between the rich and poor, to provide a living wage for everyone in this country.
And what about health care?
Universal health care, that's a central plank for Nader and for the Green Party, has been for a long time. I mean, there are so many things that keep the poor down in this country that need to change, and these are very important planks in this campaign.
Now, you just mentioned the Green Party's platform, which also is a very an inspiring document, I think. As Ralph Nader himself pointed out, that compared to the Democrats and Republicans, the Green Party platform is it's cutting-edge politics in this country. But Ralph Nader is not running on the Green Party platform, which I think is something that people are a little taken aback by, and that whole dynamic. What's the story with that?
Well, he hasn't disagreed with the platform in any way. He has just said, and he's been consistent on this since day one in the campaign, that there are certain issues that he wants to make as the central focus of his campaign, and he's going to stick as much as he possibly can to those issues and not be distracted into 1,000 different issues that reporters are going to try to pull him away from. Because the central issues that he's talking about corporate power in this country, about the political democracy issues that are so important to him, how to reform our very democratic system so people can have more of a say in our government. The mainstream media doesn't want to talk about these issues, and unless he focuses on them like a laser beam, as he put it, they're not going to get discussed. So he has said these are the issues he's going to talk about whenever he gets the chance. And of course, there's a huge plethora of issues on the Green Party platform covering just about everything under the sun. And he really hasn't disagreed with anything on there, but he said that these few issues are the ones he really wants to try to make the focus of the campaign.
Well, you said something I don't think I quite understand. You said that he wants to focus on particular issues because the mainstream media doesn't talk about those issues. And while that's obviously true, you don't hear much talk about social justice on NBC. And you don't hear a lot of talk on NBC about Ralph Nader either. So I don't understand the strategy involved here. between disassociating himself with the Green Party platform and that somehow benefiting him, when I think, for me personally, and I imagine for other people too, they find that a bit disturbing.
I don't think it's any intentional strategy of distancing himself from the Green Party in any way. It's just, I mean, all candidates do that. They have themes and major issues that they want to focus on in their campaign, and that's exactly what he's doing. And
Well,
this is, I think, the structure of this campaign, I think, is confusing to a lot of people because it's not following the general kind of strategy of presidential politics in this country, in that he is not trying to lead the Greens. He is not issuing any kind of marching order saying this is what you should all be campaigning on, this is what you should all be talking about. I mean, there is no central headquarters to this campaign at all. It's all being run on a state-by-state level, and every state Green Party is free to run this campaign however they want and talk about whatever issues they want. He's more than happy to have the Greens talking about issues that they might feel are more pertinent to their local situation.
Doesn't that strike you as a little bit inefficient?
That's grassroots democracy. Maybe it's somewhat less efficient, but that's democracy for you.
Well, I don't know I don't know that being disorganized and lacking a central organization is a sign of democracy. And I don't think I want to go with you on that.
I wouldn't call it disorganization. I think it's letting people speak for what they feel is important to them, and Nader speaking to what he feels is important to him, and it so happens that those issues that he is focusing on are some of the most important issues for the Green Party too. So there's basically harmony throughout the campaign as far as I see.
Well, let me reiterate that we're doing the Thursday evening call-in show, and we want to encourage your calls. You can reach us here in the studio at 449-4885 or 1-800-737-3030 if you're calling long distance. But see, I think the thing that throws people about that campaign organizational strategy, if you want to call it that, is that the management of government is a serious business, and it requires coordinated efforts. You know, you think about all of these various departments and all of the secretaries of these. What do they call those?
Cabinets.
The cabinet secretary. Exactly. There you go. That the whole process of running government is a coordinated thing, and maybe that's a word we can more comfortably use. And that lack of coordination, especially coming from the candidate himself, seems very odd, especially from a president.
Okay, I see what you're getting at, and I think the point maybe that we're not understanding here is that what is the main goal and goal of this campaign? If this was being operated as some, war room operation like Democrats and Republicans do it, and the only goal is to put Ralph Nader in the White House, this would be run in a very different way. We would have a central headquarters that's telling everyone exactly what to do and to march lockstep to follow what he says. But that's not the goal of this campaign. One of the primary goals for Nader and for the Greens is to help build grassroots democracy on the local and state level, to build these Green parties from the ground up. And the best way to do that is to give them the freedom to lead themselves. As Nader likes to say, a good leader does not produce more followers, he produces more leaders. And that's really what his style is here. He wants the Greens to use this campaign as an opportunity to build their own organizational skills, to speak out themselves, not just wait for him to come to town and tell everyone what they think. They need to be going out there, forming alliances, talking to people themselves, and deciding what their priorities are. And since that's the focus of the campaign, then I think the strategy and the coordination where it's at makes perfect sense.
Well, okay, and we might disagree with that goal in a presidential campaign. But anyway, we have another caller. This would be Tracy from Fort Collins. Tracy, are you with us?
My name isn't Tracy.
Oh.
My name is Bob.
Bob. Oh, I think we got our signs mixed up.
That's all right.
So, what can we do for you?
What can you do for me? Well, I'd like to thank the Green Party for getting Ralph Nader on the ballot and for giving people an alternative to voting for either Dole or Clinton. And I think that in and of itself is a really positive gesture and an important one in this campaign. So that's my main point, actually.
Well, thanks for calling.
You're welcome.
And we do welcome your calls here at Thursday evening call-in show. Laurie, to return to that point, it's been conventional wisdom in American politics that a candidate can't do well unless people perceive serious intention to win. And what you're describing is not a serious intention to win. It's a serious intention to do other things, very commendable things, but not necessarily a serious intention to win.
And it's also conventional wisdom that you're not a serious candidate unless you've raised at least $40 million, and we would disagree with that. I mean, there's a lot about conventional wisdom that we disagree with. And to say this isn't serious, again, I think misses what some of the important goals of this are. This is the main serious focus of this is to build progressive grassroots democracy in this country. And we're very serious about that. And as I said, the strategy that we're taking and how this campaign is organized is optimized to do just that, to help build grassroots democracy from the ground up, not to train people to follow another, leader on his white knight on his horse. That's not what this is about. So yes, you're going to see a lot of what we're doing going against conventional wisdom of what politics are supposed to be about.
I understand. And we have another caller.
Hi.
Hi, are you there?
Yeah, I am. It's Karen.
Karen, hi.
Hi, I work with the Greens, and I just want to reinforce the idea that this campaign is a people's campaign. That's why Mr. Nader is not spending more than $5,000 of his own money to be involved with this campaign. That's why it's a decentralized campaign. That's why individual parties and groups in each state are advancing their own set of causes with their own volunteers and resources. And we are very, very grateful to Laurie for the groundwork that she did on helping to get this campaign going. Laurie, we still need you. So when I hope that people who hear this are not just going to sit at home and wait for Election Day to roll around. I hope they will get involved. Now, we're an all-volunteer organization, so we always have to just do the best we can with the people that we have. But we really hope that people will work with us here in Boulder, people will work with us around Colorado, and people will work with groups elsewhere if they live outside of Colorado to advance this candidacy. This is one of the first times since I became a voter that I can remember that I felt like I was really part of a presidential campaign. I always vote. I go to elections, and I vote for county commissioner or whoever. But here I am feeling like I am part of a national event. We don't know what the outcome will be, but it's important to get involved. And as Laurie said, this is a grassroots effort. This is a citizens' effort. So I just wanted to reinforce that.
Well, I can certainly agree with you there. Getting involved would be the key. That's the whole point of democracy.
Exactly.
It certainly is.
Well, thank you for your call.
Thank you. And Laurie, I hope you give out the contact number if you have it.
Oh, we'll do that.
Great. Thank you.
And I think that we found Tracy from Fort Collins.
Hi.
Hi there.
I really am excited also about this campaign. It's wonderful to have a candidate running who I support, and I think the choice of Winona LaDuke is just outstanding. And, I started out pretty skeptical, so I'm glad you're discussing those points. And it was Nader himself who convinced me, that this question of is a vote for Nader a vote for Dole. And he said, if Bill Clinton represents what you're looking for in a president and that those are the things that you want for this country, then you should vote for Clinton. And if he's not doing that, he doesn't deserve your vote. And, I really can't say that Bill Clinton is doing things the way that I want to see them done. And I'm excited about voting for Nader. And in terms of, local involvement, I was wondering if I could give out a phone number for our Fort Collins group.
Well, okay.
Please do.
It's 970-224-4996.
And that's the Fort Collins Greens?
Oh,
Fort...
it is it's the Fort Collins Greens, but I gave the wrong number.
Oh.
Let me try again. It's 970-221-9532.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And we have another caller. I'm having trouble reading the name.
Sandy Cruz.
Sandy.
Hi.
From Ward.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi.
Welcome to
I'd like to speak to the lesser of two evils argument, because that seems to be holding many people back from supporting Nader. I think that's a critical point. And one thing I heard on KGNU that bears repeating is that voting for the lesser of two evils is still voting for evil. So I'd like to reiterate that, and also to mention the 120 million eligible people who don't vote. If we can get those people involved, then we're not taking any votes from Clinton, because they wouldn't have voted for him anyway.
Good point.
So I would like to point out that probably the most important work we could be doing right now is to get people to register to vote who don't normally vote. I think the registration closes about 30 days before the election. So if all of us can just get a few people to vote, we'll have massive numbers for Nader.
That's a great point. In addition, I think that's getting people out to vote is one of the surest ways to help the Democrats win back Congress from the Republicans. Frankly, the reason, it's conventional wisdom at this point that the reason why Democrats lost Congress in the 94 elections is because nobody came out to vote. People are so uninspired by Clinton's performance. And I think you're going to see the same thing in the 96 elections unless you have a progressive candidate on the ticket on the presidential ballot who will bring people out. Otherwise, we might just see a repeat of 94.
Well, that's an
So we
interesting
have
point.
a little bit less than a month probably to get people out to register. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And this would be Ruth from Boulder.
No, this is Connie from Ward.
Okay.
Hello.
Having
I was very inspired to hear from Democracy Now! The speech from Nader, his acceptance speech, and I wanted you to go in a little bit more depth about what he says about social issues or civic responsibilities, etc., kind of along that line. And another question I have is it possible that Ralph Nader will be able to be part of the presidential debates that are viewed on television?
That's a real good point to bring up. Actually, that's kind of hanging on a thread right now. The Presidential Commission Commission for Presidential Debates is deciding this week who they're going to allow into the debates. And this is the crucial time to voice your opinion on this. I'm going to give out a phone number real quick here. I just got another one. Okay, this is the same one I have. Yeah, it's 202-872-1020, and that's the number you call to voice your opinion to this Commission on Presidential Debates if you want to see Ralph Nader and all of the other qualified third-party candidates in the debates. I mean, it's just a travesty how these debates are decided upon. It's decided by a bipartisan commission. That's 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans, which of course makes it real fair to third-party candidates. And one of the main qualifications they have is if they think you're a valid candidate. And of course, as I said before, one of their measures of a valid candidacy is if you've raised $30-40 million. And that's just a travesty of democracy and justice in so many ways. So please, in the next day or two, call this number and let them know that you think Nader should be in these debates.
And I think that's an idea we could all support, is widening the scope of the debates. Well, thank you very much, Connie. And we'll try to get Ruth now.
Hi. This is a wonderful show. It's very exciting, but there are 2 related questions that I haven't heard discussed at all, and I'll be very brief and hang up and listen for your answers. I'd like to know what Nader's foreign policy would be, and related to that, his drug policy.
Well, thank you. Very good questions.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Laurie, what do you think about that?
Well, I can answer that more saying what the Green Party's policies are. I haven't heard Nader address every one of these issues, so I can say what the Green Party stands for on these issues, and I think it's fair to say that it reflects what this campaign and what Nader's about. As far as drug policy, the Greens do feel that this war on drugs has been a complete waste of money on the part of our federal government, and it's basically a war on urban inner cities more than it is a war on drugs, and that money, all of that money that's being put into this war on drugs, should be put instead into fighting the causes of drug addiction and into education and prevention of drug addiction, and that is a very important point for the Greens.
And what about foreign policy?
On foreign policy, the Greens platform is very much against the current U.S. policy of militarism. They feel that U.S. should be removing all of their foreign bases, that the basic role of the military should be defending our country or acting in peacekeeping roles. And if we do need to use our force for some kind of intervention, it should not be unilateral intervention. We should only be allowed to intervene in other countries when it's part of a broad UN coalition.
Well, actually, I think Ruth is raising an interesting point, and maybe a bigger point. Why is it we haven't heard Ralph Nader talk about foreign policy issues?
Again, I think it just goes back to the idea that he has 3 or 4 major themes that he's really trying to focus on in this campaign, because if he doesn't focus on them so strongly, they're going to get no airtime at all. And foreign policy, things that do get a lot of discussion in presidential debates. These issues about corporate abuse of our political and economic system does not get any discussion in the presidential debate, and if he doesn't hammer in on those, then they're not going to be talked about at all.
Now, am I remembering correctly that you did say that he has come out in favor of cutting the military budget drastically?
Oh, yes.
Okay, which certainly is a foreign policy issue. He's just not framed it that way. For him, it's a tax issue, helping the budget by freeing up money for social programs.
Yes, I think it falls under a lot of categories, but certainly that's an important plank for him.
Interesting. Now, in terms of this broader strategy that you've been talking about, it does appear that you're going to be relatively successful. Now we'll have to see how successful in getting people to support Ralph Nader actually going out to the polls. What is going to happen in 2000, or is that something you're not interested in talking about yet?
Oh, I'm very interested in the year 2000. I mean, I think that's a real focus for a lot of people. I mean, if we succeed this year in really stirring up and galvanizing grassroots movement, I think you could see the Green Party or some progressive force, be it coalition with the Labor Party, New Party, as major players by the year 2000.
Is that something Green's been talking about, coalition with the Labor Party?
Oh, sure. Coalition building is always a very important part of the strategy for the Greens. You know, at this point, the newly formed Labor Party has made a policy that they're not going to run or endorse candidates this time around,
right.
So we can't form any official electoral coalitions, but that's certainly very, very important.
And I am correct in recalling that Ralph Nader spoke at the Labor Party's convention.
He did, and was cheered wildly.
Yeah, so that is an interesting bridge right there just for coalition buildings. And I see that we have another call. This would be Arnie from Boulder. Let's see if we can make that happen. Arnie?
Hi. I wanted to see if I could just give you an address for an internet site that the Green Party, it's actually New Mexico Greens, has put together.
I noticed that all the various state Green parties have been getting organized on the internet.
Oh, I think so, yeah. I helped them do just a little bit of work on this site and put up the party platform itself. And there's links to other, both Democratic and Republican sites, as well as, I'm sure there's a lot more in there by now. It's been a while, to tell you the truth, since I've looked at it. But if people wanted to check it out, can I give you that address?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it would be www.gp.org.
Oh, okay, that's an easy one to remember.
gp.org,
Okay.
And it has the New Mexico Greens party platform and quite a bit of other information on there.
Well, thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
And as long as we're giving out web addresses, I'd like to give out the address for the National Clearinghouse for the Nader campaign. Has more information than you could ever need on Nader, on the Greens, on the status of this campaign. And that is www.vais.net/tilde Nader96.
And what about the Colorado Greens?
Colorado
Do they have a website?
Well, there's a general website for Green Parties of North America, and then there's a link to talk about the Colorados. And I don't know that address offhand, but if you just, do a search for Greens, you'll find it right away.
I imagine. Okay, and we have Hugh from Boulder.
Hi, I came in late, 6:30, and so I just got the gist of what you've been doing. The Green Party definitely going to be on the ballot here in Colorado?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, good.
And Nader is on the ballot for sure thus far in 20 states plus D.C., plus Washington, D.C.,
Good.
and there's about another 10 states where there's still a good chance that he'll be on.
So perhaps 30 states. Well, it's something at the beginning.
Oh, it is. And technically it's enough to win, but,
Yeah, good.
That's not...
Because they're some of the big ones.
Yes,
Right, and,
including
no,
California.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
I was just going to say, it was very coincidental that I happened to tune you in just now, and you were talking about Ralph Nader when I turned the radio on, because I had just read an article in the London Review of Books in June of this year by Christopher Hitchens, and it gave me the most negative impression of Bill Clinton I have ever had in my life, and it's a very good article if anyone has a chance to read it. It's based on his extensive reading of some recent books about Clinton that go into great details about his past. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read a couple of sentences. Do you have time for that, about what he says about Clinton? Or is that...
Well, I think I'd rather pass on that.
You'd rather pass?
We do have another caller waiting.
Okay, because I think it would uphold your position in wanting to have people vote for a third party. So that's the reason I wanted to go into it. All right, thanks.
But thank you anyway. I think we probably have a preponderance of opinion in that direction already.
Oh, I'm sure.
Thanks. And now we're moving on to another Karen from Boulder.
Hi. I'd like to address the issue of Ralph Nader or the Nader-LeDuc party not addressing all the issues. And Richard, I kind of got some skepticism from you on that. Well, I'm not comfortable with this because I don't know exactly how they feel on this issue and that issue. And Laurie, I'd like to commend you, since this is a people's grassroots campaign, that you are so knowledgeable and can answer these questions. Well, what does Ralph feel about this? How do you feel about that? You know, because that's a hard position to put you in, because it is, again, the philosophy of leaderlessness and all that.
That's why I called her for this show.
Pardon me?
That's why I called her.
Okay. And I think one thing... the reason I'm going to vote for Ralph and Winona is because they're intelligent people. They surround themselves with intelligent people. They're leftists. I think they can handle it. You know, I think they could handle appointing a cabinet, running the government, and all those types of things. We don't know how they feel on a lot of specific issues. We do know how Clinton and Dole feel because they've been in the public spotlight for years. They're getting all this free press. I think we have to go in a matter of trust. I mean, we trust that they would bring about real change. And the issues that they're talking about are real issues. And if you just, listen to any of their, what you might call campaign talks or any of their speeches, there's substance to them.
Oh, no, that's certainly true. What I was getting at was confusion over the strategy, because it seems to me that has been Bob Dole's strategy, is that he's distancing himself from the Republican platform by claiming explicitly, as Ralph Nader does, that he is not running on that platform, and Dole goes so far as to say that he hasn't read it, so where Ralph Nader can clearly claim that he did read it. And that strategy seems to be losing for Dole, and one wonders why Nader would adopt the same strategy.
Well, I don't feel he is.
So I said, I think
that
he has
strategy.
very, very different reasons for sticking to the issues.
Well, I'm sure that's true.
And I do want to add, like Karen said, and the Greens have positions on every issue under the sun, and we're certainly not going to have time to talk about them all tonight, so I certainly encourage people to look up the Greens platform. You can certainly find them all on the web, or if you don't have internet access, you can call the numbers which I will give by the end of the show, and they will, or we will be glad to send you information, because it is a very comprehensive platform, and you really should get to know what they stand for on all issues.
And I would guess, most people who listen to KGNU or who are listening to this show are liberals, and they are not pleased with the way things have come down in the past 4 years with Clinton, or even before that. And I would trust that the Greens or the Ralph Naders and Winona LeDuc's position are closer to their own. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much for calling. I don't know that I would necessarily agree with Karen's evaluation of Ralph Nader as leftist, which I think actually is part of the problem, because people probably know that I am. And I think that serious politics demands serious analysis and serious strategy. And what I see, at least with what the Labour Party is doing, and of course the Greens could very much fit in line with this, is a very real possibility of taking power in 2000. And that aspect of what the Nader campaign is about seems to me at least underemphasized, because it's not something that I've really heard, is this claim of the real possibility of taking power. Well,
one thing, I'm responding to the issue that you don't perceive Nader as leftist, Frankly, I think that's a great strength. That's what I was talking about earlier, that I think Nader appeals to people across the board because he doesn't have some stigma of being stuck ideologically somewhere on the spectrum. Basically what he talks about are common sense issues, common sense reform of our system, and I think that's a real plus.
But, Laurie, serious politics requires a serious analysis. Left traditionally means an analysis that comes from ordinary people. And if one is seriously concerned about taking power, because isn't that really what this is all about? I mean, a lot of, and that's part of my problem, is that I think a lot of the Nader campaign has been about these great ideas or influencing the Democrats to move in a little bit more liberal direction, to take care of people a little better. But I think what I'm concerned about is power and people having power.
And how the left, how progressive movements in this country are going to build power is through building from the grassroots, and that's why the focus of his campaign is to help build from the grassroots. I mean, the number of Greens running for state and local office this year has just blossomed, largely because of all the excitement and energy stirred up from this campaign, and that is the strategy is to build from the state and local level, and use this campaign as a very, very important tool for galvanizing energy and excitement.
Well, and I would agree those are positive steps. But I wonder if Nader and the Green Party have a real understanding of the possibility of taking power, of how people take power.
Well, I think they don't buy into, maybe what I understand you're saying is that, I mean, to really take power, you have to follow the same route to power that the Democrats and the Republicans have, and that I see the Reform Party doing too.
And that's taking power as winning the presidency.
Well, I think you start somewhere and you build, and having a future focus, a focus just beyond this November, is a lot more important than just power as the end. I mean, the means of this campaign are every bit as important as the end.
But politics is about power. That's the whole point of politics, is power.
Well, it's building towards a position where progressives can have real power in this country, and it's kind of foolish to think it can happen overnight. Of course, it's going to take many, many years of building from the grassroots, and that's the main focus of this campaign.
I understand, but and maybe it's just my hang-up and it's not really there, but I see the Green Party as being timid about taking power, that they don't have the guts to take power.
Oh, I would very much disagree. I think among the progressive forces in this country, the Greens are the only ones who are not timid, who are willing to jump in electorally. What I see frustrating is so many other groups like the Labor Party, New Party, who are holding back, who keep saying, no, it's not time yet, we need to wait another 10, 20 years and just do more general organizing before we can really start running candidates and really try to take power. The Greens are the ones who are sticking their necks out this time and saying, no, now is the time to throw our hats into the ring and get involved, and they're just about the only ones on the left who are doing that.
Well, I think you're not taking seriously what the Labor Party is doing, because they're not talking about 10 years, they're talking about 4. And I think they are talking about taking power, and they're just saying that they need that in order to make it work.
And the Greens have been taking basically the same strategy, but they started a long time ago. They've been around in this country for many years and have been building towards this point, and this is yet another step along the way.
Well, that's a good point, and let's go to another caller. We have Philip from Niwot.
Hi.
Hello.
There's a number of things that you touched upon that I think merit some comment. One is that Nader, during his acceptance speech, referred extensively to the Green Party platform and stated his support and said the reason he accepted running as a candidate in the Green Party was because of the Green Party platform. So it's not like he's running away from the Green Party platform.
Well, I think he's running away from gay rights.
Well, he's running away from a whole plethora of other things. If you want to talk about that, damming rivers that are going to kill salmon runs, etc. I mean, he could be talking about every single issue that anybody might care to bring up.
And let's keep in mind he gets about 5 minutes of airtime a month, so you have to pick your issues pretty carefully.
And I think Laurie's been, very clear about why he's doing that. He needs to focus on what he considers to be the basic issue, and the basic issue, as I see it, is building a citizens' movement to empower citizens to have a true democracy in this country, which has never really existed here. We've had sort of pseudo quasi-democratic, representative democratic system. And Nader's saying, look, here are a number of ways to really take back power, take back ownership of pension funds, take back ownership of cable television companies, set up community assemblies so people in their neighborhoods can stop developers from steamrolling them. In other words, he's interested in giving people power so that they can fend for themselves in a system that right now has no channels. He's interested in developing those channels and developing citizens' movement.
Isn't it possible that the system itself denies people power?
Well, he's saying change the
Exactly.
system.
Oh.
And he has one of the most thorough critiques and ideas on how to change the system of anyone in this country, I think. And I'd love to give you some examples.
No, I understand.
Yeah,
I think
he really is focusing on giving power to people that can be used to protect their rights and to assert their leadership and their involvement in the decisions that are affecting their lives and affecting our lives. One other thing I was going to ask Laurie to do, if she would, is repeat that telephone number for the Presidential Debate Commission.
Yes,
So
gladly.
all there went by kind of fast.
Gladly. The number for the Commission on Presidential Debates, if you want to see Nader in these debates, 202-872-1020. And while we're giving numbers, let me give the local contact number for the Nader campaign. That's 575-1704.
Okay, well, Phil, thank you very much. It's an honor to have you listening to the show and calling in.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay. And that was Phil Hufford from 91. He was the Green Party candidate for governor. What was that, 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, we have Evan now from Boulder. Evan, you there?
Yeah, hi. I'm really glad Phil was talking about true democracy. Really, power corrupts, and the U.S. is probably the worst offender in the world. And both of its immediate neighbors in Mexico and in Canada have the same idea. In Chiapas, the Mayans en masse, some 500,000, make all the decisions by votes of the people. And they've been doing this since before the revolution, and it's one of the reasons they've had such a success in holding off the U.S. armed Mexican army and taking things from fighting into 2.5 years of negotiations. And we had a representative of the bishop up here who visited our Chiapas coalition in Denver, and I said, so how many people, vote in these referenda? And he said some 500,000 on a weekly basis. And I said, do teenagers get to vote in these referenda? And he said, yes, and even children. And what this means is that a small child in Chiapas has a vote in their future, which we adults in America have never had unless you include our little referenda on which Elvis stamp we wanted.
True example of democracy.
Right.
Or parody, anyway.
Evan, I know you work a lot for more direct democracy, and that is very important on the Colorado platform. They do support the voting by phone, and on all the platforms I've seen very strong support for greater use of ballot initiatives and referenda.
That's great news. So in Ontario, we just got an email from the Premier of Ontario, who is in the Progressive Conservative Party, and he wrote an article which is on the web called Your Ontario, Your Choice, where he wants the people to tell him exactly what kind of a system to have people vote on their future will be. So both of America's neighbors who have to live with our abuse of power have come up with the same answer, which is simply to disperse that power to as many people as possible. And we'd better get the message, or we will no longer be known as the cradle of democracy, but hopefully not, its deathbed.
Well, those are very interesting examples. Thank you very much for calling.
Could I give the web address of the Ontario paper?
Sure.
It's a little long.
Okay.
www.gov.on.ca/mbs/premier/e.html.
Oh my God, that was a long one.
So they could probably just look for on a search engine, Your Ontario, Your Choice.
Right. Thank you very much.
You bet.
And that's an interesting point about websites I've noticed coming from Canada is they all specify in the address whether they're English or French. I guess you can have a bilingual country and make it work. Okay, we have another one. Ben from Boulder. And Ben, are you with us?
I'm with you. Well, I think some of the conversation and some of the recent callers are really good. One of the pieces that came up was this conversation about quote-unquote taking power and ends versus means. And I think it's really important to take a really close look at that issue. I'm very active in looking at sort of the bigger picture. Where are we going culturally? Are we going to have a sustainable future 200 years from now? And when I look at that kind of frame and I look at the evolutionary context that we're in right now, I see a continuum of transformation of process, human process. I study consensus process, and what I see is a continuum that essentially goes from war to collaboration and consensus. So war, lawyers, majority rule, consensus processes. And the way we do democracy, quote-unquote democracy at the federal level these days is really lawyers and majority rule at best. And I think what people need to understand is that when Nader is looking at a different process, he's actually talking about something that doesn't have a minority that loses. I think the Greens have a more collaborative approach, which is, to borrow from the Quakers, that everybody has a piece of the truth. And if all of the pieces of truth are part of a decision, everybody wins. We get a better decision. We don't have wars. We don't have expensive legal battles, and possibly lawyers go out of business, at least the ones who are essentially representing what I would call tools of coercion. Money is soft bullets, and this is perhaps the most central issue for our time, is to address this kind of issue. And it happens at every level. It happens at the national level. It happens with the multinational politics. And I think the place where people can make the most difference at this time is to engage in the local level and essentially create a political, a civic climate that does not allow anything but real democracy, where all people are considered. And there is not entitlement based on money. People vote. People have an ability to make decisions, to contribute in the process, and the people who are considering their input are committed to something that we would really call democracy, that we can actually get behind. So I ran this fall for council because I felt like some issues in Boulder, most importantly social justice, was not being considered. When people look at the cultural context that we're in, a whole culture, essentially a sustainable culture, which is what I work with the Solstice Institute in Boulder at 302 Pearl, we look at a balance of three things when we're looking at a cultural context. And one of those is an economics that doesn't destroy the earth. The other is a healthy environment. And the third one, which is often neglected in Boulder and other places, is social justice. And we have to do all three. And so looking at the Nader campaign, he's focusing on a very central issue to restore the opportunity for democracy. And this is what we need to look at, and I think it's fair to say that I was thinking about voting for Clinton. I'm not. I'm going to be voting for Nader this fall.
Okay, you got a convert. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And you got me thinking about consensus there, and I'm all for consensus as a process of operating, but one example of consensus that I'm sure very uncomfortable with is the consensus that we're seeing in Washington, D.C. these days between Clinton and the Republicans, the complete consensus on the priorities of this country, that our highest priorities have to be downsizing the government, to be balancing the budget by cutting social programs while preserving military spending. This consensus that the trade policies of NAFTA and GATT, which give free-range corporations globally to bypass any and all social and environmental and labor restrictions, that kind of consensus I find very, very disturbing, and we've got to have another choice there. And that's why I'm so glad Nader is providing us that choice.
Well, let's touch on this issue of proportional representation, which is part of the Green Party platform.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that Nader's going to be talking about? Because that would certainly fit into this theory of restructuring the way we get people involved in democracy from the bottom up.
I don't know that that's going to be a big issue for Nader himself. But as you said, the Greens find that to be a very, very important reform for the campaign. So you will be hearing about that in the campaign because these state parties are the ones who are going to be doing most of the campaigning, so it's certainly going to be an important issue.
Well, for people who may not be up on the whole the PR thing, as they say, could you give us a brief definition?
Sure, real brief. The idea that the kind of representation you have should be proportional to what the actual vote is. Let's say in this election, in parliamentary elections, say the Green Party gets 5% of the vote, they should have 5% of the representation for this country, as opposed to the winner-take-all system, or if you have 49% of the people voting for one party, that means they get no representation whatsoever.
So that would be done nationally instead of as a whole pot instead of geographically.
Well, they're looking to introduce it on the local level at this point. There's actually
The
this
state
year going to be a
legislators?
referendum in San Francisco to start using proportional representation to elect their city
Ah,
local.
fabulous.
Yeah, which is great. And they're looking to implement it on the local level and build up to the state level and
Well,
yeah.
now we do have just a couple minutes left, so to be fair to all of my guests, ending with an opportunity to give out some of those phone numbers.
Oh, great. Okay, once again, the number for the local Draft Nader campaign, and this can get you information about the Nader campaign or the Green Party, is 575-1704. If you know people who live in other areas and you think they'd like to get involved, it can give you a national clearinghouse number, and they can give you information and contacts all over the country, and that would be 1-888-NADER-96.
Okay, you've been listening to KGNU's Thursday Evening Call-In Show. I'm Richard Curtis, the host this evening, and we've been talking with Laurie Geller from the Colorado Greens. Thank you very much, Laurie.
Thank you.
And as I said, this is KGNU Boulder. Coming up next, we have Highway 322.